I'm going to begin with bringing in MS Now senior White House reporter Vaughn Hilliard, senior Capitol Hill reporter and host of Way Too Early, Ali Vitale. She is at the National Cathedral. Veteran columnist and geopolitics analyst Bobby Ghosh, and former Undersecretary of State and MS Now political analyst Richard Stengel. It's good to see all of you guys. Vaughn, I first want you to sort of set the stage for us here and how different these meetings may be today.
Both of these wars are now colliding here, and both of these men just literally about an hour apart from each other. We expect Prime Minister Netanyahu to arrive to the White House any moment now, just mere minutes after Zelenskyy departed here. Essentially are coming to the president to try to seek further commitment, while also demonstrating and showing what they say is intelligence that shows that Russia specifically and Iran are effectively helping each other in their separate wars, and essentially trying to make the pitch to President Trump to continue to provide resources to both countries and remain offensively engaged in their regional battles here. Zelenskyy, we are told, was going to be showing that Iran, according to their intelligence, helped in striking U.S. military bases. And the President of the United States has suggested that he is aware of the intelligence that he needs in order to make proper assessments. And that's where he this morning pushed back against the Israelis, publicly suggesting that Pickaxe Mountain, effectively that centrifuges, nuclear centrifuges, were being moved to their facilities there. And the president said that the reason the Israelis were opening and publicly sharing this was to try to get him to remain offensively in the game there. And so there's a lot of questions, especially after the president over the last several days became aware of munitions and defense stockpiles going to lower limits, blaming the Biden administration for its initial commitment to the Ukrainians in their war. So there's a lot of questions about where the president's commitment is going to go from here, and especially understanding that the president has not offered even explicit security guarantees to Ukraine, which has been the long-standing request from Ukraine of the president across their 9 bilateral meetings over the course of the last year and a half.
There's a lot I want to dig into there on what the president is thinking and where his commitments may go. But Ali, I'm wondering if you can kind of spell out for us how significant the passing of Senator Lindsey Graham is at a time when these two conflicts in which he was heavily engaged played a major role here domestically and sort of in the president's ear. Without him present, does that shift the dynamics at all in your view?
Completely shifts the dynamics, because as we were talking about in our last hour, there is a vacuum now for the influential role that Senator Graham played, both in terms of being a Trump ally with whom the president would speak about foreign policy, but then also Senator Graham was someone who, up until days before he died, was shuttling back and forth between the U.S. and Ukraine. He was in Kyiv meeting with President Zelenskyy 48 hours before returning to the United States and having his untimely heart attack and passing away, or rather heart event and passing away. And so it is an extreme loss from that perspective as well. But then I also think in terms of legislation and the role that Graham played on the Hill when it came to Ukraine, this was a moment where within the MAGA movement, there was a heavy strain of anti-interventionism driven by this idea of America first, heralded by messengers like the vice president, J.D. Vance, who was someone who really, when he was a senator, voted against Ukraine aid and continued that strain as a prominent voice in the administration. Graham always cut against that grain. And he was someone with a big enough voice in Trump world that he could really be a strong counter when it came to America's role on the world stage and being clear-eyed, not just about who Putin is, what Russia is doing, but when it came to the role that the U.S. had to play in supporting our Ukrainian allies. And so to that end, there are big questions on the Hill about this Russian sanctions package that was bipartisan, more than 80 co-sponsors, but led by Senator Graham on the Republican side. It's something that he was apparently on the phone talking with President Trump about on the night that he died. And so what is the fate of that package? And is it too little too late to actually have an impact in the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine? Those are just some of the open questions as Washington starts to grapple with the loss of this man from a practical perspective, and then also think about him in a more emotional and human sense, which certainly is going to be one of the things that we end up seeing today when things really begin behind me at the National Cathedral here.
Bobby, I want your thoughts on these two meetings happening at the White House today and where the president's strategy and thinking may be headed right now. We know that he wrapped up his meeting with Zelenskyy, and I got word that Netanyahu is now at the White House. And we know that Trump is saying that he's going to ask Putin about Zelensky's allegations. And there's been reporting around this, that, Russia has been helping Iran in this conflict. But then also the president speaking to Axios and kind of pouring cold water on Bibi's arrival. And again, openly sharing frustrations here. How do you see the president operating as these two conflicts start to overlap and converge a bit?
Well, his number one priority, clearly, he's desperate to get out of the mess that he himself created in Iran. He wants a deal that allows the United States to reduce its posture in the region. He wants a deal that opens the Strait of Hormuz and almost anything else with regard to Iran, the nuclear question, the missiles, the support for other terrorist groups in the region. All those things are secondary for him now. First and foremost, he wants the Hormuz cleared, and then he wants to get the United States out of there. That being the case, both his visitors today will be presenting inconvenient truths to him, none of which he can be sort of a stranger to. He knows these things. He would have received briefings from American intelligence long before about these things. But we've seen with President Trump that he's perfectly capable of completely disregarding the facts when it comes to making policy. His policy objective comes first and foremost, and his interest in pursuing that objective sort of overrides all other considerations. That's been consistent with him throughout his political career, and I think we'll see the same. He will give Bibi a listen. The indications we have already suggest that it might be quite testy. With Zelenskyy, I think there's been a significant change in his appraisal of Zelenskyy and of Ukraine since
those around the president, his allies.
That's right. Since that terrible meeting over a year ago when frankly he misbehaved with a guest in the White House. He has shown more recently some signs of respect for what Ukraine has been able to achieve. That doesn't change the fact that he does not want the United States to confront Vladimir Putin, somebody who he has admired for a very, very long time. So with Zelenskyy, I think the tone of the conversation might be softer than with Bibi Netanyahu. One hopes so. But I don't think Zelenskyy is going to get what he wants from Trump, which is that the American cast iron guarantee of Ukraine's security. He's going to continue to push Zelenskyy, Trump is, to try and make a deal with Putin, regardless of anything else. And I'm not expecting at the end of the day today that there will be any great change in policy coming out of the White House.
Yeah, these two men are very different, but they are bringing these sort of inconvenient realities to the president, who is sort of scrambling for a way out of these messes that he promised voters he would get the United States out of. In the case of Iran, 4 to 5 to 6 weeks or so, and we're now 5 months. Rick, Bobby mentioned this, but the sort of shifting alliances here on the right and their relationship to Ukraine has been very interesting to watch. One figure that I have found sort of fascinating has been Laura Loomer, who has been sort of this whisperer in the president's ear. She doesn't technically have a job in his inner circle, but everyone knows that she spends time with the president, that she has his number, that at times she does seem to genuinely have a pulse on what he's thinking and where he's going. And she has made a complete 180 on her rhetoric and her posture toward Ukraine. She was parroting Putin's talking points, and then she was just in Ukraine meeting with Zelenskyy and others, and now is trying to push figures on the right to support Ukraine. Does that tell you something real about what must be happening sort of in right-wing politics, but also in the president's own mind?
Well, I hope so, Antonia. I wrote a whole book about Russian disinformation, and I always wondered who actually subscribed to it and believed it. Well, Laura Loomer did. And it really is sort of amazing to me that she and other people on the right got this Russian mis and disinformation and believed it over kind of American sources. And But I welcome her change to understanding that Putin is a terrible guy whose interests are not aligned with the U.S. and that Zelensky is someone who should be an ally of America. You know, it's interesting talking about this in light of Lindsey Graham's passing, because Lindsey Graham was a kind of old-fashioned John McCain globalist. He was not an American firster by any estimation at all. He believed in flexing American power around the globe. He believed in American involvement around the globe. And that's part of the reason that he supported Zelensky. One of the things that Zelensky is here today to do is to point out the fact that Russian intelligence is helping the Iranians target American servicemen. That is just a red line that no one should support in any possible way. So Graham's passing is damaging for that. But the fact that Laura Loomer, as you say, has now subscribed to the kind of correct version of things is welcome.